It's Spoilerin time, the full experience, where we spoil the first, ultimate, loser, and last episode of a series that you may or may not love. I'm Tom Merritt, he's Brian Brushwood, and we have been watching Cheers.
This is only our second lap on any of these shows ever, and I'm terrified, Tom, because I think we have discovered uranium. I think we've discovered something magical.
Yes. So this is the loser episode. This is supposed to be the worst episode of Cheers, as rated by multiple places. I mean, I found it on Screen Rant, but it was also noted elsewhere as the worst episode. It's the lowest rated one on IMDb. It's episode 5 of season 10. So it's towards the end of the run. So you might think, okay, they're running out of ideas. I get the worst episode would probably happen towards the end. It's called Madame LeCarla. And the log line is that Carla's psychic is retiring and wants to hand over her psychic business to Carla. So you're like, oh, okay, so it's going to be full of like a bunch of cheesy stuff. Brian, how did you find Madame LeCarla?
Well, before we begin, like I'm going disclosure. I'm going to be more interested in why this was poorly rated, because to me, it was a tight Cheers episode that made a statement that was pro-skeptic in a time that skepticism was not hot. Like 20 years before Jane Randy did The Amazing Meeting, we have Carla and Ted Danson just pretty much saying like, yep, psychics are total BS. Anyway, so I don't know if people are claiming that the episode was bad or at the time they just really wanted to believe in psychics or what. All I know is that this was a fine episode that I liked very much, and I am very happy we're doing this experiment.
Yeah, I think that the worst I can say about this episode, and I haven't watched every single episode of Cheers, although I have watched a large percentage of them. I think the worst thing you can say about this episode is that it is, in fact, flat, right? Like the jokes are somewhat telegraphed. They're somewhat expected for Cheers.
It's but also we have the benefit of hindsight. So to us, maybe they look like one-note jokes when in fact this was the first time NBC had ever said the words, yeah, psychics are total BS.
I don't know if that's true. I feel like there were a lot of psychics or BS episodes of television in the history of television. Like I feel like I remember a Dick Van Dyke episode even as far back as that. But this was certainly no holds barred, right? Like there was nothing. There was no pretense spared. There was no wink of like, or is it? You know, like, and that was one thing I was expecting. There was
definitely no both sides on this.
Yeah. It was very like, oh, that was the other thing I was going to tell you, Carla. I'm a complete fraud. I don't know anything. But when I say it was telegraphed, it was like, these are the expected jokes, right? You expect Carla to freak out and think something bad is going to happen. You expect her to try to answer the call and predict things. You expect Ted Danson to lie to her and tell her she did great to spare her feelings. Like there were not a lot of twists here. The twist would have been if there had been some element of spirituality that was real and they didn't go there.
That would have been the most obvious, cheapest hedge they could have done. And I cannot believe that Hollywood of all places didn't take it. They didn't take the bait on it. They just straight up said, yeah, no, psychics are total BS.
Now, to be fair, there are a few places out there that do not rate this as the worst episode critics-wise. but IMDb rating, this is the one that got the lowest rating. And to be fair, it got a 7 something. It's not like it got totally panned. So I don't know. I'm willing to entertain that we picked the wrong worst episode, that maybe there is a worse episode out there, but we're just going with the information we're given, right? We're going with the metrics.
Oh, Tom, come in, bring it in. Give me a hug. Tom, we're not here to say which is the boringest episode. We're here to judge the lowest rated episode. And oftentimes we find pure gold, because the lowest rated episodes tend to be things that, well, I didn't tune in to Cheers for this. I didn't tune in to what was the last one we did?
The West Wing.
The West Wing for this. And then meanwhile, they're fine pieces that are standalones. Like this episode, so far we're 2 for 2 that we have found episodes of popular shows that could be completely standalone episodes as a commentary on something of their time. And 2 for 2, we're discovering that the least popular episodes are the ones that say the least popular things, but we live in the future 30, 40 years later, and we get to say, yeah, no, they were right.
I actually disagree with you a little bit about how controversial or unwelcome this episode might have been. I feel like it was probably like, yeah, psychics are BS. And there were some people that might not have watched it. I think it was pretty mainstream to think psychics were frauds. So I don't think this is a very special episode where they, push the skeptic line. I do think it's surprising that they didn't hedge it for the 30% of the audience that believes. I also just think it was a middling episode. I wouldn't put this as a great episode as far as its construction. But it's fine. Like I certainly wouldn't have guessed it was at the last, and it had some pretty fun stuff. Michelle Pfeiffer and Kevin Costner are outside. Like that was a great beat where my first reaction was like, oh, Michelle Pfeiffer, it's definitely 1991 and all the people. And then they did the twist in that little bit of like, oh, and Kevin Costner. And then you have the one guy, that represents the like, ooh, Kevin Costner, like running out there. That seemed more progressive than anything else in the episode in some ways.
Man, you know what this makes me want to do is, since we have patrons at patreon.com/Cordkillers, it makes us want to try to seduce people who worked on these episodes to talk to us, because you and I have made friends with several of them, and I don't think it's that hard for us to get a hold of them. So if that's something you would like honest answers to, hit us up at cordkillers@gmail.com.
The I Ching was mentioned. I thought that was another thing that surprised me. Like I would think in 1991, you'd still be very like Western oriented. So that was interesting. And did you catch Frasier using the phrase logging in?
No.
At the end, when he's talking to Carla, he's like logging in on this for a minute. I was like, oh, it's 91. Like we have the internet.
We know what that phrase means.
Yeah. That really stuck out to me. So this was fun, and definitely did not feel like it was the lowest rated episode. Or if it is, it just shows how good Cheers was, I guess.
So, one last note, Frasier is exceptionally kind in this episode, despite the fact that being a scientist, although a psychiatrist.
That was the fun part, right? Is that Sam is the one who's like the least taken in by Carla, and Frasier, the intellectual, is. Yeah, that was a nice twist. I should give that more credit.
Yeah, no, it was a fascinating gestalt of that moment. But in general, if we can finally, Tom, make this about you and me.
Finally.
This full experience is a genius idea.
That's so good. It's so good. If we do say ourselves.
Like, we will do this for all of the shows. Also, we were going to say this for after talk, but I guess we'll talk about it now. Justin brought up the idea of like, what if you did a similar thing for every very special episode? But the problem is, like, every big TV show doesn't have a very special episode. But the idea, as you and I talked about, Tom, was what if we just went on spring break in between?
Yeah.
We did 4 episodes, first, upper, lower, last, take a break, and then that's when we just deconstruct and have Justin on for a very special episode of something. And
it's a very special episode of Fall.
Oh yeah. I guess we could deconstruct an episode of our own.
No. I'm not saying we do our own show. I'm just saying it's first, ultimate, loser, last, and then in between, before we get to the next one, a very special episode where we break down a very special episode of another television show.
Yes. Which, by the way, to be completely transparent, the first thing I did was like, has anybody figured out this idea before? And then I found like some, like, I don't know, 7 other shows that did it. I'm like,
of course.
Thanks for doing our homework.
Also, we will be doing the last episode of Cheers, which, as we mentioned when we did Best, is also its top rated one. So it could have also been Best. That means we'll need a new series once we're done with Cheers. So what should we do next? Email us cordkillers@gmail.com.
Just before we wrap things up, the B plot of Woody and his aspiring actor.
Oh, and his theater. Yeah. It was a solid B plot. It was a B plot, but it was all right.
It felt like it was made to stick because it would keep at least some part of the story rooted in the bar.
Right? Yeah. And it was space, right? It was like, oh, we need to build tension for what's going to happen with Carla next. So let's take a breather and we'll give you something mildly interesting, Woody's career in the theater. It was, as if also a fairly expected joke. He writes down the positive affirmations and then his co-actors discover them.
Tom, I hope that as we go forward in this experiment, we just keep shaking our heads and saying, this was the worst?
This was the worst? Come on.
It's amazing.
So that is Madame LeCarla, season 10, episode 3 of Cheers. We've got one more coming next week. Watch the last episode of Cheers along with us, season 11, episode 25, One for the Road. It'll be a very sad goodbye, once again, as it always is, with the last episode of a full experience. And we'll see you next time. Patreon.com/Cordkillers. Bye.